Alright, so a little bonus video about sort of how to add some sprites onto these. I'm just going to use the ball pit thing since I have it here. But basically what you can do if you go into your particles, and this would be good if, again, you want to make like a little smoke trail behind something, or some fires, or, I don't know, there's a bunch of different ways you can use this, depends on your needs. So what you want to do is go into your particles, go into shading, and so for the ball pit we had spheres because that makes sense. What I'm going to do is pop in the sprites that I mentioned before. And I can't tell if it's trying to get me to reset. Oh, no. Okay, cool. So when I moved my viewport, it was like, hello, look, sprites. So now we have these sprites, and again, these will sort of always look to point the camera. So to actually do something with these, will show up by default if you look in the Arnold render view. I should probably unhide my light. Hooray. So we have sprites, and they look ridiculous. To make these, actually useful, what you want to do is go in, grab your particles, and just go ahead and assign a new material. Again, I'm working in Arnold, so I'm just going to go ahead and use an AI standard surface. And you should be able to see now that, like, if we change this color slider, it's going to mess with the colors for the sprites. So what I'm going to do, I have imported it and then I got rid of it. Okay, fine. I'm just going to go ahead and import like a little color texture for this. I have just like a really, really random graphic of a little smoke poof that I found. It's going to take my computer a second because I have way too much stuff on it. But basically at this point you should be able to texture it like you normally would, so I'm just going to go ahead and set up cards. It's kind of like the definition of sprite, it's little cards. So on my desktop we're going to grab this terrible little smoke PNG. And you can see it's really squished and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for the UVs, but like again, if you're doing something careful, you can, do better than that. So next thing you want to do, because like obviously I don't just want a bunch of weird black cloud card thingies, because they look insane, is hook this up a little bit better with a little bit of opacity in this. So I'm just going to go ahead and find for Arnold's geometry tab, but like basically again, however you make cards is what you're doing here. So I'm just going to grab that file and drag it onto opacity as well. So that we should, what have I done? So if we go ahead and again render this, now we should have theoretically, oh, that's what I have to do, right? Because Arnold's insane. Go ahead and grab your particles, go into your particle shape, and then all the way down under Arnold, you have to untick the opaque button, which I legitimately forget to do every single time, and now we have really goofy little poofs of cloud. So the other thing that you can do in this case, so again, it really is dependent on what you need. I'll show you how to set up something that's like maybe a little bit nicer of a smoke trail than this ball pit. So I'm just going to do the lag. I really need to figure out how to fix this. It's very annoying. Sorry, give me a sec. Great. Okay, cool. Hey, it lives. Sprite. Whatever. Alright, so I'm just straight up going to convert this into a different idea entirely. Ha ha ha. So instead of what I did before, what I'm going to do is go through and let me also just make sure I don't have any caches on this. Cool, no caches found. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and key the emitter. I'll go in and just sort of key the translate values of this, key selected, and then I'll just have it running across the sky in a somewhat random fashion. Like, cool, that looks great. And by great, I mean terrible, but who cares? Demos. Alright, so what I'm going to do, I also had what the heck? I had some keyframes set for the sorry, I'm still in the particle shape. I was looking for this because I want to break the connections on this. So like I said, I'll sort of show you how to set up a little smoke trail if you guys need that. So right now I've basically just shifted my emitter around a little bit and then apparently set the particle rate per second to be 0 because I'm a dingus. So let's make that 100 as per the default. Alright, cool. So now we have these goofy little particles. So I'm going to work with this, just assuming, again, this is maybe, you know, attached to some kind of thing emitting fire or whatever. And what I'm going to do is a few things. So for the ball pit, I had the particle size set to whatever made sense for that. So I'm going to go ahead and increase that a tiny bit, which, actually, to be fair, I've never actually worked with sprites before. It could also just be my computer being terrible, which is entirely possible. Oh, whoops, okay, sorry, that's, okay. So I was actually setting the radius of the sprites, and it seems like the sprites are staying the same size. But either way, there's a few things I want to do for this. So one, if this is a smoke trail, it's not going to last forever, presumably, so what I'm going to do is say a random range, and to be fair, I actually kind of forget what the range is exactly, but I believe that it's a frame range, unless I'm going insane. So I'm going to set this to 50, and I'm also going to go down under collisions and turn off self-collide. So it made sense for the ball pit, but in this case, it's just little sprites. If they clip each other, it's not the end of the world. Okay, 50 might also be a unit of time. So let's restart this. So again, sort of play with settings so you figure out what works. Great, great. Alternately for this, I'm going to be really lazy and just do constant. And I'm just going to set this to 0.1, because that should kill them pretty quickly. Okay, yeah, so I don't know what the heck the random range was doing before, but you can see that it's almost immediately killing these particles, so I will go back and set this to 1. And now the particles are sort of dying as they go. So not really sure what was happening with that before. Let me try 0.1 and see if that does anything. So you can do like random range, which will just create a little bit more variation in like how these die. So it really just depends on what you need. And again, I really need to like stop. There we go. So now we have like a little bit of like a thinner trail at the bottom. It's really what I was kind of going for there. I am actually going to add a random plane in the background so you can see the particle sprites a little bit better. Alright, cool. So other stuff you can do with the particles, like if this is a smoke trail, maybe it looks, I mean, for one, it looks a little bit silly because the motion of the emitter itself is like hilariously slow. But what you can do is go in and mess a little bit with like force field generation, dynamic properties to get a little bit more variation within the solver itself. So in this case, I'm just going to say I don't want the particles dripping down so aggressively. We're just going to imagine this is like a slowed up, again, like something flying through the sky. You want a little bit of that trail just like hanging out. So what you can do is theoretically turn off forces in world. And that way, that would be if you had any, you went in and made like fields and solvers here. I believe that would disable those for this particular sim. So what you can also do, we don't have those, so it's not going to really do anything here. You can theoretically ignore solver wind. So this should be for that particular solver itself. So in this case, like this emitter, this little nucleus that the particle made. And you can see that again now it's very, very clearly not doing anything interesting in terms of like falling from gravity. So that's an option that you could do if you wanted to. You could also, depending on what you want, you could also set gravity to be lower. To be honest, I don't often recommend messing with gravity. So I'm gonna, if you want to mess with the gravity, it's in your nucleus here, so you could set this down to be something less. By default, it's set to sort of standard Earth units. But you can see that we have a little bit of falling here with the particles. It's just like not as aggressive as it was before. So there's also a bunch of different stuff, like if you turn on wind, that is now a thing, which it's back to 9.8. So you can do wind, you can do wind noise, and this is all going to affect your particles. So it really just depends sort of on what you're looking for. Honestly, I feel like the best way a lot of times to sort of learn about some of these is just to go in and play with the settings. A lot of them for dynamics are like fairly self-explanatory in terms of, you know, like wind. You can also, if you want, change the direction of gravity. So like I could make gravity go up if I wanted to. It all, again, really just depends on what you need and what Maya decides to actually let me type in. But yeah, so I mean, you could set gravity to up just for like really quick, janky little flames or something like that. Kind of make your life a little bit easier without setting up some like crazy fancy thing. So that honestly is like mostly the goofy sprite stuff that I had. I know you can add like animated textures to these and all of that stuff as well. But that I think should be probably enough to get you to do some little like smoke trails or anything like that. You can also do stuff, I believe, unless I'm going crazy, you might be able to turn opacity off, like if this is based on age. Oh, and now it renders nicer too, that's exciting. But in this case, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense probably to do that, because it's being controlled by the Arnold shader, so I don't think that would make a huge difference, honestly, in what you're doing. I think once you override the shader, a lot of these shading attributes kind of stop being relevant. So there's also some other stuff where you can do a bunch of weird things like instance geometry onto this if you wanted to spawn cupcakes or anything like that. There are a little bit, so like the sprite attributes down here, if I wanted to make these larger, I could be like 5. So now we have a much denser little particle cloud of smoke or fire or whatever the heck I'm saying this is. And again, if you render these, this is going to behave like cards or like a standard, you know, Arnold unit thing, and I'm not super sure what's happening with the opacity there. That could actually just be a ginormous shadow on stuff. I'm not entirely sure. In this case, what probably would make sense is to actually go in, if that is causing weird shadows, go into your nParticles, and I'm sorry, your particle shape, Arnold, and you can do. So in this case, I'm just gonna see what happens if I turn off shadows. So I'm gonna say don't self shadow, so the particles won't cast shadows on themselves, and don't cast shadows on other stuff. So if that fixes the issue, it was just like a weird shadowing glitch, and that totally didn't fix the issue, unless I need to re-render this. No, okay, cool. So that's some other weird thing. I'm not entirely sure what's happening there, but either way. Oh, that actually might just be because I have, my plane is like in the middle of my particles, which it's not, so fascinating. Yeah, I'm going to chalk that up to I've probably done something very bad with the opacity. Possibly because I notice it's in areas where it's a lot denser, so possibly what's happening is the opacity on this is like not quite gone. So I'm going to try a thing real quick, and that's really the last thing I want to do. I'm just kind of curious to see what's actually causing this. So what I'm going to do is go back into my Hypershade, grab my material thing, which I already have here. I'm going to go ahead and expand that. And what I'm going to do is basically map this through a ramp texture before putting it into the, I'm just going to grab any of these, before putting into opacity, sorry. So I did red, so I'm going to do, what, every time, aha, opacity, great. So what this should theoretically allow me to do is really like make sure that that black value is black, so you can see that like it's doing a little bit of like modification to the sprite itself as I change this, but this is again going to ensure that anything below this threshold of like 0.3 is considered black. And that is my Hypershade again. Boop. Okay, cool. So that doesn't seem to have been the issue unless again Arnold didn't register it. But yeah, so that was, like I said, not entirely sure. I don't usually work with sprites that often. But either way, you have the basic setup to do this, and this is probably just like a weird, silly glitch in Maya. Actually, oh, no, I know what that is. That's me being an idiot, because remember when I was like, oh yes, just mess with the opacity and the particle settings. I am willing to bet now that this is, from me messing with the shading of the opacity based on age, and I'm just going to say off. And that has also not done anything. Okay. when you're like so sure that your idea is correct. Okay, what if I... Okay, you know what, let me just turn this off and refresh my render thing again and see if that does anything. Okay, no, I'm clearly going insane here. It's gonna bother me forever now, but honestly, like I said, probably set something up really stupid when I was enabling this, so I'm not gonna worry too much about it for this. It could also honestly just be a bunch of cards sort of on top of each other in like a weird way. But anywho, that's basically cards. Probably you're not going to have that issue unless you've been doing a bunch of weird stuff like I have. So hopefully that was helpful. Sorry for the anticlimactic ending.